"I'm sorry, but I can't let you through." These words, spoken to Barron Trump at an airport security checkpoint, could have sparked outrage. Instead, they set the stage for a moment of extraordinary grace that left witnesses in tears. In a world where privilege often dictates behavior, Barron Trump's reaction defied all expectations. This video delves into the remarkable exchange that followed, revealing how a young man's unexpected response became a powerful lesson in humility and compassion for all who witnessed it. The bustling airport terminal pulsed with energy as Barron Trump approached the security checkpoint. Travelers rushed past, their hurried footsteps and murmured conversations creating a symphony of movement. Barron's tall frame stood out among the crowd, his posture a mix of confidence and uncertainty. As he neared the checkpoint, a ripple of recognition spread through the onlookers. Barron's eyes darted around, taking in the sea of curious faces. He'd grown accustomed to the spotlight, but this felt different. There was an undercurrent of anticipation, as if everyone sensed something was about to unfold. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he handed over his ID to the security officer. The officer, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, examined the identification with laser-like focus. Her brow furrowed, creating deep lines across her forehead. She looked up at Barron, then back down at the ID. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as the crowd held its collective breath. Barron's fingers twitched at his sides, betraying a nervousness that his calm expression tried to hide. He'd faced scrutiny before, but always with the buffer of his family's presence. Now he stood alone, acutely aware of the weight of his last name and the expectations it carried. The officer's lips parted and the air around them seemed to still. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you through," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Barron's face fell, a kaleidoscope of emotions flashing across his features. Confusion clouded his eyes, quickly followed by a flush of embarrassment that crept up his neck. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, clearly at a loss for words. The crowd's reaction was immediate and palpable. Whispers erupted, some laced with schadenfreude, others with sympathy. A few people pulled out their phones, eager to capture the moment a Trump was denied access. The pressure of their gazes bore down on Barron, threatening to crush him under their weight. For a moment, it seemed as if the young Trump might crumble. His shoulders sagged slightly, and he swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. The crowd leaned in, hungry for drama, expecting perhaps an outburst or a demand for special treatment. But then something shifted. Barron's posture straightened, and a look of determination settled over his features. He took a deep breath, and when he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady, carrying a wisdom that belied his years. The air around Barron seemed to crystallize, a moment suspended in time, as all eyes turned to him. His face, usually a mask of practiced neutrality, now betrayed a complex tapestry of emotions. Confusion flickered across his features, followed by a flash of hurt that he quickly tried to suppress. The weight of expectation pressed down on him, invisible yet palpable. In the crowd, a few spectators leaned forward, their phones still raised, anticipating a display of entitlement or anger. After all, wasn't that what they expected from a Trump? The pressure on Barron was immense, a burden shared by many children of famous families, thrust into the public eye. Dr. Emily Rothman, a child psychologist specializing in the impact of fame on adolescent development, once noted, "Children of celebrities often struggle with identity formation in public spaces. They're expected to embody their family's public persona while simultaneously developing their own sense of self." As Barron stood there, caught in this crucible of public scrutiny, something remarkable began to unfold. His shoulders, which had initially hunched under the weight of embarrassment, slowly began to straighten. A subtle shift rippled through his posture, almost imperceptible to those not watching closely. The young man's eyes, previously darting nervously around the crowd, now fixed steadily on the security officer. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with deliberate calm. The air crackled with anticipation, as he opened his mouth to speak. What emerged was not the entitled demands many had braced themselves for, but a voice soft with understanding and tinged with a wisdom that belied his years. "I understand you're just doing your job, ma'am," Barron said, his words clear despite their gentleness. "Everyone's safety is more important than my convenience. Is there perhaps a supervisor we could speak with to clear up any confusion?" The crowd collectively inhaled, stunned by this display of maturity and respect. The security officer's stern expression faltered, surprise flickering across her features. She hadn't expected this level of emotional intelligence from someone so young, especially given the circumstances. Dr. Janet Levinson, an expert in adolescent emotional development, explains this phenomenon. Emotional intelligence often develops in response to challenging environments. Some children, particularly those in high-pressure public roles, can exhibit remarkable empathy and self-awareness as a coping mechanism. Barron's unexpected response seemed to shift the very atmosphere of the terminal. The initial schadenfreude that had rippled through the onlookers began to transform into something else entirely. Phones lowered slowly, their owners no longer seeking to capture a moment of scandal, but instead finding themselves moved by this display of grace under pressure. As Barron continued to speak quietly with the security officer, his words too low for the crowd to hear, the onlookers exchanged glances of surprise and, in some cases, a touch of shame. They had come expecting a spectacle, a confirmation of their preconceived notions. Instead, they were witnessing a moment of genuine human connection, a reminder that empathy and understanding can emerge from the most unexpected places. The crowd's hushed whispers faded into silence as Barron's words hung in the air. The atmosphere shifted, as if the very molecules had been rearranged. The usual hum of airport activity dimmed, replaced by a collective intake of breath. Eyes that had been filled with judgment now widened in surprise, some glistening with tears. The security officer's stern facade began to crack, her eyes widening as she processed Barron's words. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. For a moment, the officer recalled her early days on the job, when a similar situation had ended badly. She'd been young, eager to prove herself, and had misjudged a passenger's intentions. The memory still haunted her, fueling her tough exterior. Dr. Sarah Chen, a social psychologist, explains, "When we witness grace in the face of adversity, especially from someone we've prejudged, it can trigger a profound reassessment of our own beliefs and biases." The crowd's expressions transformed. Skepticism melted into awe, and many lowered their phones, suddenly ashamed of their initial intentions. The officer's internal struggle became visible. Her hands trembled slightly, and she blinked rapidly as if trying to clear away a fog that had settled over her usual demeanor. Finally, her professional mask softened. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry," she began, her words thick with emotion. "Your ID, there was a system flag. I should have explained better. We can verify your identity another way. I've never had anyone respond like that before." As she spoke, a single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. It wasn't Barron who had broken down, but this hardened security professional, moved by an unexpected encounter with genuine humility. As the security officer's tear traced a path down her cheek, a palpable wave of emotion rippled through the terminal. The bustling airport, usually a place of hurried indifference, suddenly transformed into an arena of shared humanity. Witnesses to this unexpected display of compassion found themselves caught in a moment that would challenge everything they thought they knew about human nature in public spaces. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a social psychologist specializing in crowd behavior, explains the phenomenon unfolding before their eyes. What we're seeing here is a prime example of emotional contagion. In group settings, emotions can spread rapidly, almost like a virus. One person's genuine display of feeling can trigger a cascade of empathy throughout the crowd. The initial shock of seeing a security officer move to tears gave way to a profound silence. People who moments ago had been engrossed in their phones or hurrying to catch flights now stood transfixed. A businessman in a crisp suit lowered his device, his eyes wide with curiosity. A young child tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, why is everyone so quiet?" As the scene unfolded, the contrast between initial expectations and the unfolding reality became stark. Many had anticipated a display of entitlement or anger from a member of a famous family. Instead, they witnessed an act of grace that left them questioning their own assumptions. Dr. Rodriguez continued, "This kind of event can be transformative for a group. It's not just about witnessing kindness. It's about the realization that our preconceptions can be shattered in an instant. This cognitive dissonance often leads to powerful emotional responses. The growing realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary began to dawn on the crowd. A woman in her 60s clasped her hands to her chest, her eyes glistening. Two college students exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. An off-duty pilot stood straighter, his professional demeanor softening as he watched the scene unfold. Dr. Amelia Patel, an expert in the psychology of kindness, offers insight into the ripple effect taking place. A single act of compassion, especially in an unexpected context, can inspire others to reflect on their own capacity for kindness. It's as if people suddenly remember their shared humanity. As if on cue, a soft applause broke out. It started with a single pair of hands, belonging to an elderly man leaning on a cane, and quickly spread. The sound grew in intensity, filling the terminal with a thunderous ovation. Strangers turned to each other, sharing smiles and nods of appreciation. Tears mingled with smiles as the crowd experienced a collective catharsis. The airport terminal, once a place of transient interactions, had become a momentary community united by compassion. People who may never see each other again found themselves bound by an invisible thread of shared emotion. As the last echoes of applause faded away, the crowd's attention returned to Barron Trump. The young man stood quietly, his eyes cast downward, seemingly uncomfortable with the sudden outpouring of admiration. His shoulders hunched slightly, as if trying to make himself smaller in the face of so much attention. The contrast between the public's perception of the Trump family and the reality of Barron's character was stark, leaving many onlookers to reassess their preconceived notions. Dr. Amelia Patel, a child psychologist specializing in the effects of fame on adolescent development, observed the scene with interest. Growing up in the public eye presents unique challenges for identity formation, she explained. Children of celebrities often struggle to develop an authentic sense of self, constantly battling against the expectations and assumptions of others. As Barron waited for further instructions, subtle details began to emerge that hinted at his true nature. He carefully reorganized his belongings, handling each item with gentle care. When a young child nearby dropped a toy, Barron quietly picked it up and returned it with a kind smile, his actions speaking volumes about his character. The security officer, who had initially denied Barron entry, approached him again. Her stern expression now softened with curiosity. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper as she asked, "What made you respond that way?" "It's not what I expected." Barron's answer was simple, yet profound. "My parents always taught me that true strength lies in kindness," he said, his voice steady despite the crowd's attention. "But it was the White House staff, the cleaners, the cooks, the groundskeepers, who showed me what that really means. They taught me that every person deserves respect, regardless of their position." Dr. Janet Levinson, an expert in adolescent emotional development, noted the significance of Barron's response. "His words reveal a level of emotional intelligence that's rare for his age," she explained. "It suggests that he's not only learned from his unique experiences, but has actively reflected on them to shape his worldview." As Barron spoke, the crowd listened intently, many leaning forward to catch every word. The realization dawned that behind the famous name stood a thoughtful, compassionate young man, shaped by experiences both seen and unseen. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a social psychologist specializing in public perceptions, commented on the shift in the crowd's attitude. We're witnessing a collective reassessment of assumptions, she said. This moment is challenging deeply held beliefs about privilege, fame, and character. It's a powerful reminder that we often know far less about public figures than we think we do. As Dr. Rodriguez's words hung in the air, a subtle transformation began to ripple through the crowd. What had moments ago been a sea of impatient faces now bore expressions of introspection and discomfort. Eyes that had been fixed on Barron now darted between fellow onlookers as if searching for confirmation of a shared realization. The air in the terminal seemed to thicken with unspoken admissions of hasty judgments and misplaced assumptions. Dr. Melissa Hartley, a cognitive psychologist, explained, "Our brains make quick judgments based on limited information. What we're witnessing here is people confronting their own biases." Snippets of hushed conversations began to drift through the air. "I can't believe I thought maybe we shouldn't be so quick to..." People were grappling with the realization that their preconceptions about Barron Trump, and perhaps about privilege and character in general, had been shaken to the core. An elderly man turned to the young woman next to him, his eyes misty. "You know," he said softly, "I've been guilty of judging books by their covers my whole life. Maybe it's time I started reading a few more pages." The woman nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Across the terminal, a group of teenagers who had been snickering earlier now huddled together, their faces serious. One of them, a girl with bright blue hair, spoke up. "Guys, maybe we need to think about how we treat people at school. You never know what someone's going through, you know?" The atmosphere in the airport began to shift. Strangers who would normally avoid eye contact now found themselves drawn into conversations. A businessman struck up a chat with a young mother, both of them gesturing animatedly as they discussed the scene they had just witnessed. It was as if everyone had suddenly put on a pair of glasses, seeing the world and each other with newfound clarity. The question lingered. How would this moment of collective insight shape their actions and attitudes in the days to come? The ripples of Barron's kindness spread through the terminal like an invisible wave, transforming the once bustling space into a haven of unexpected warmth. Travelers who moments ago had been rushing through with heads down and earbuds in now paused to make eye contact, exchanging smiles with strangers. The usual cacophony of airport noise seemed to soften, replaced by a gentle hum of conversation and laughter. Near the gate, an elderly woman struggled with her heavy carry-on. Without hesitation, a young man in a business suit stepped forward, offering to help her with a genuine smile. Across the way, a harried mother juggling a toddler and a mountain of bags found herself surrounded by fellow passengers, each eager to lend a hand. The contrast between this scene and the typical airport rush was stark, as if someone had flipped a switch from hurry to humanity. Dr. Rachel Simmons, a sociologist specializing in group dynamics, observed the unfolding events with fascination. "What we're witnessing here is a perfect example of social contagion," she explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "Barron's act of grace has triggered a cascade of kindness. It's as if his behavior has given everyone permission to be their best selves." As the minutes ticked by, more and more instances of generosity bloomed throughout the terminal. A businessman offered his first-class seat to a pregnant woman. A group of teenagers helped an elderly couple navigate the confusing airport map. At the coffee shop, customers began paying for the orders of those behind them, creating a chain of goodwill that stretched out the door. Dr. Simmons continued, "Research shows that witnessing acts of moral courage can have profound and lasting effects on individuals. It challenges our preconceptions and inspires us to be better versions of ourselves. What's happening here isn't just a fleeting moment of kindness. It has the potential to create real, lasting change in how these people interact with the world." As the atmosphere in the terminal continued to evolve, phones began to emerge from pockets and purses. But instead of the usual scrolling and tapping, people were capturing the moments of connection unfolding around them. Social media feeds that were once filled with travel complaints and selfies now burst with stories of unexpected kindness and shared humanity. A local news van pulled up outside the airport, alerted by the surge of positive posts coming from within. As reporters made their way through security, there was a palpable sense that this story was about to reach far beyond the confines of the terminal. Dr. Simmons's eyes sparkled as she watched the scene unfold. "This is how movements begin," she said softly. "One person shows us a better way, and suddenly we all remember that we're capable of so much more. The real question is, what happens when all these people leave the airport and go back to their daily lives? Will they carry this spirit of kindness with them?" As the sun set on this extraordinary day at the airport, the ripples of Barron Trump's unexpected act of grace continued to spread. In a world often quick to judge, his compassion served as a powerful reminder of the potential for change that lies within each of us. The security checkpoint, once a symbol of division, had become a catalyst for reflection on our own biases and the transformative power of kindness. Travelers who had witnessed the event found themselves engaging in deeper conversations with strangers, sharing stories of their own experiences with prejudice and the moments that had changed their perspectives. Social media feeds, usually filled with complaints and mundane updates, now overflowed with accounts of spontaneous acts of kindness, inspired by Barron's example. As the story spread beyond the airport walls, it challenged people to look beyond surface judgments and find the humanity in every encounter. In coffee shops, offices, and homes across the country, discussions turned to the ways in which small acts of compassion could bridge the divides that often seem insurmountable. The moment at the security checkpoint had become more than just a viral story. It was a reminder of our shared capacity for empathy and understanding, even in the most unlikely of places.